Good morning, Shalford family. Day 2 of our Holy Week scripture and prayer readings, and wanted to encourage all of you today for day 2. Yesterday our theme was looking at sin, and we were asking, why did Christ need to die? Why did Christ need to go to the cross? And we learned that it was because of our sin, that the wages of our sin are death, and that he paid the penalty for our sin by dying. And today we're going to ask, how did he bear that penalty? And we're going to look at the biblical theme of sacrifice. Where does sacrifice come from? We see it in the Old Testament, that because God said, if you eat of that tree, you will surely die. Because he said that, we learn in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 22, which is one of our readings today, that without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sin. In the Old Testament, we see a sacrificial system that was intricate, that was detailed, that was rhythmic and continual, and you see sacrifices being offered year after year. And Hebrews reminds us that because the sacrifices were year after year after year, it was just this continual reminder of the looming effects of sin. That those sacrifices could not perfect the person who was making the sacrifices. They were, for a time, God would look upon the sacrifice and actually look over their sin, and called forbearance. He would look ahead to one day when a perfect sacrifice would come. But these sacrifices over and over were the requirement for sin. Because there was sin, someone had to die. Blood had to be shed because God, the Creator, the Holy One, had been offended. Cosmic treason had been committed. But then in the New Testament, we find Jesus. We find Jesus live not just a good life or an exemplary life, but a perfectly pure and holy life unto God. And then we see him at the end of his life die innocently, guiltless, die. And then here's what the book of Hebrews says in chapter 10, and this is some of our reading for today. I won't read all of it, but Hebrews chapter 10 says this: "It's impossible," starting in verse 4, "for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins." That's referring back to the Old Testament sacrificial system. It's impossible for that blood to take away sins. But consequently, when Christ came into the world, he said, "Sacrifices and offerings you have not desired, but a body you have prepared for me. In burnt offerings and sin offerings you've taken no pleasure. Then I said, Behold, I've come to do your will, O God, as it's written of me in the scroll of the book." When he said above, "You've neither desired nor taken pleasure in sacrifices and offerings and burnt offerings and sin offerings," these are offered according to the law, then he added, "Behold, I've come to do your will." He does away with the first in order to establish the second. And by that will, we have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. The passage goes on to talk about the perfection of Christ's sacrifice. I would encourage you to go read Hebrews chapter 10. The readings today are verses 1 through 18. And that will encourage you of Christ's perfect sacrifice for you. So how did Christ pay the penalty for our sin? It was his willing sacrifice in our place. He came to earth with his sight set on one goal, and that was the cross. We see in the gospel accounts that he says over and over when we preached through the book of Luke last year that he was making his way to Jerusalem. He would foretell to his disciples that he was going to suffer and he was going to die. The whole time he was looking towards the place that he would go, be betrayed, and embrace death. That's why he came, and he came to bear the penalty for what we couldn't bear. And I grew up, my pastor, Pastor Johnny Hunt, would always say, we owed a debt we could not pay, and he paid a debt that he did not owe. And that's the good news of Easter, is that instead of us dying and staying dead forever and eternally being separated from God, the good news is that Jesus' sacrifice for you is perfect. He left nothing unpaid. He left nothing undone. He paid in full every sin in your life, past, present, and future. There's nothing for you to make up for in the sacrifice of Jesus. So I want to encourage you today to run to Jesus. Any sin in your life is covered by the blood of Christ. Any shortcoming in your life, anything you feel like you lack, I pray that it would be made up for in Jesus, knowing that he loves you and that he sacrificed himself for you. So this Easter, as we look to the cross, let's remember Christ's perfect sacrifice. Shalford, I love you, and I'm praying for you today.